Hello, and thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative Podcast. We're the standard setting consortium of trade finance A-listers on a mission to liquefy this glorious asset class. Now, my name is Doris Kuninovich, and it's really lovely to have you here again with us. Our focus today actually is on a fintech that directly addresses the lack of access to funding for corporates. And this is by providing a technology platform that enables financing for receivables. I'm talking about Vabble.io. And we're here today with the founder and CEO, Pablo Terpolilli. Pablo, it's really lovely to have you here in our podcast series. How are you today?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I was looking forward to this podcast.
No, we've definitely been wanting to get you on for quite a while, so I'm really excited to have you on today. Now, I know that Vabble.io started off in 2021, but you're not anything new to finance, and we want to talk about your background to start with. So tell us a little bit about your background and your journey to Vabble.io.
Surely, that's absolutely right. No spring chicken, as we discussed earlier. Um, I started really life in banking many years ago in Argentina, where I'm from, working for one of the local banks, precisely on the trade finance, on the international department. So doing everything that has to do with trade finance. Life then takes over, and for various reasons, I went to the US. I studied there. And when I graduated, I decided to remain, and I worked with various investment banks. One of them, Goldman Sachs, took me to London in '05. And so there I met a lot of people. Amongst them, one of the people I met was Christoph Kugelmann, who was at Goldman Sachs right around the time. And so always doing sort of emerging markets credit and lending and financing and more banking and financing, which one thing that led to another. After 17 years of being in the UK for the most part, with bits and pieces in the US, it led into actually going back into trade finance and advising companies. And amongst the companies that I had the pleasure to advise was TradeTech. So that took me right back into the thick of trade finance, and especially on the distribution side, because all those years with investment banking, Goldman Sachs, UBS, then a bit at Standard Chartered as well, it was about distributing products to institutional investors. So that was my always my angle, my approach to credit, to lending, so distribution to institutional investors. And so in time, presented with the dynamics of what I could observe in the market, the amount of liquidity being dedicated to short-term fixed income instruments, and coupled with the instruments, that receivables that were being generated. Um, it uh, it dawned on me that the ones holding the receivables with the most need for financing were precisely export companies in emerging markets. And so
Yeah.
that's when the Vabble idea started. And Vabble, if I may say, it's really a play on the word receivable. So last
Receivable.
correct. So
Gotcha.
it's a little bit of a play on the word on that part.
So I know that supply is usually created by demand, and you've just sort of given us like a highlight of the thought process behind Vabel. So if I may ask, what gaps, specific gaps, you mentioned, were you seeing in the market at that time that kind of influenced that decision to start Vabel, and can you give us an idea of how that process of actually starting this fintech began?
That is a really great question, Doris, because there are various gaps. I mean, one gap is the gap that was created over the last 20, 25 years just by the increase in trade, right? And not the on par increase in bank financing. Therefore, there was this major gap created where bank financing couldn't really keep up. Banking, as we know, being highly regulated environment, and with banks having had the experiences of the various crises that we lived during the past sort of 20 to 25 years. Not enough sort of liquidity actually can be dedicated to fill that gap. So it was our view, it was my view, that one of the best ways to plug that gap into financing was opening the doors to institutional investors to be able to participate and to throw their liquidity behind actually filling that gap. So Vabble really started keeping that gap in mind, and also the gap that is created by the fact that there's a gap in sort of capabilities, skill, mandate, access to technology, that the institutional investors, and when I say institutional investors, I'm thinking pension funds, asset managers, insurance companies, treasuries, and various others, institutional investors that have an appetite to invest in the asset class. And I have direct experience and knowledge of how much is there waiting to happen, really. So that's the other gap, and that's the other gap that we try to fill with Vabble. So we've created a platform essentially to be able to provide all of the steps that these kind of investors need in order to be able to invest in the asset class. And as I said earlier, having advised TradeTech through my nearly a year working with Christoph and the team at TradeTech, in helping them sort of reach that type of distribution and shape the product. I was exposed to a lot of what was actually happening at the time in this space, and that led to actually creating um, really a ramp up of assets into TradeTech. So TradeTech for us is a key part of our infrastructure, where we essentially face the investors through TradeTech and use their null repackaging infrastructure and technology to be able to satisfy these investors' needs, reporting wise, regulatory wise, and they really fulfill a key um, of a part of our value chain.
Mm. And we'll talk a little bit about how you've sort of worked with trade tech very closely in the past and in the present. But I do find that a lot of service providers and technology companies that are very client based and solution based tend to be very successful in this space. And I wonder, you know, looking at the ecosystem of how trade finance distribution occurs, how you would say that Vabble.io has created a way to differentiate itself from the rest, and what you kind of do to contribute to closing this 1.5 trillion dollar trade finance gap. I know the number keeps fluctuating every year as we go along.
Yes, we know it's a very very big, very very big number, and I want to really hold on to one of the concepts that you really are pointing to here is how can we actually build a bridge for that liquidity to be able to participate in the market, and that's really where we see part of the solution of how do we increase the amount of funding available for trade financing, for supply chain financing. Um, and, and so I think the key for us is to stay focused on a niche, and to have a very clear view about what we can do on scale. And scale is really really very important in this endeavor. So to be successful, we have an absolute customer focus, a very obsessive customer focus. I would say we're obsessed with our customers and
As
our
everyone
customers.
should.
Yes, and so, but sometimes you tend to want to provide a solution, and therefore in trying to provide a solution to someone, you sometimes drift from your core objective, and that's a dangerous path for us, for any tech company, I think. So we want to stay true to our focus, and our focus is essentially cross-border receivables that are um, you know payable by high-grade companies in developed markets with a confirmation from the buyer, and that can be transacted on a true sale basis, right? So we have built an entire microservices ecosystem, a workflow automation, such that a company in emerging markets can essentially upload one of their receivables into the Vabble platform, and that receivable can go through the different steps that need to go through in as short a time as possible, to be able to put it in front of those institutional asset managers that might actually care for the asset. And we know how to do this on paper. We have done it on paper all the time. So we know exactly what needs to happen. But the key is, how do we take that process that is done on paper and put it on a platform, and we automate it, and we bring the timings to the absolute minimum possible. So I really like, for example, to use Revolut with my kids, especially. They need money, and I can send them money on Revolut immediately. So I go like, "Oh, here it goes, bang," and they get it. Imagine if that or something like that could happen in international trade, right? Where basically say, "Okay, I love that receivable. We like it. It checks out. Done," and then you can get your cash. Uh, that for any export company is near miracle. They don't even know that something like that may actually come to them. So in our approach to the emerging market companies, we have had tremendous response, and very, very high interest. And so we're very close to being able to satisfy the demands. We're negotiating with some of the largest investors in the world on these, and we're doing a massive amount of work. We've invested in legal infrastructure. We've invested in know your client, in the whole onboarding process, in sanctions check. We are able to check sanctions on an instrument, on a per instrument basis, um, to be able to provide that kind of immediacy, immediate response to the clients. Um, we count with some of the largest banks, as well as are um, managing our payments and our collections. And we've had tremendous expressions of interest from the insurance community, from the trade credit insurance. This is a market that is completely untapped. To them, exists, is out there, but it cannot be tapped, because there's no connectivity between the holders of these receivables and the buyers of the receivables.
Right. I feel like it's there is a lot to think about that you have already thought about, and to automate any platform or technology, you have to think about it working on scale, providing the solution, think about so many factors, tiny little factors that actually makes it very seamless and customer efficient and just very 2023 really. And I think one of the things that would really help also be the electronic trade documents bill and digital asset laws that are going to come into place to help globalize and move forward how transactions kind of happen on an easier basis for everyone involved. And I think that's really going to be the future. Let's talk a little bit about liquidity now. Do you have specific corporates that you are interested in providing liquidity to, and are there in specific regions as well?
Great question. Yes. So our focus is on emerging markets, right? So the technology can be used anywhere, but really our focus is in emerging markets, and there's several reasons for that to be the case. First of all, our focus is on the specific receivables, right? So to the extent that a company in any emerging market is able to produce widgets that are well liked and bought by very good credits, and there's a long-standing relationship with these you know between this supplier and buyer, then that is a situation that we can come in and we can immediately help the emerging market company to actually get cash earlier and not have to wait for the buyer to pay on term, or essentially to be able to offer better conditions to their buyers, to not have to be on the phone asking for prepayments because the order is big, and we know that access in emerging markets is quite limited, and the options are quite limited. So our focus is on emerging markets, and we do, as I said, KYC, AML, sanction check on board the company to a UK standard, to FCA standard, and once we do that, we also credit monitor the company. We don't do a deep dive sort of credit analysis on the company, but we do monitor the health of the company. Therefore, if it's a healthy company in emerging markets, selling to good customers in developed markets, that is where we can come in and we can help, because that is where the liquidity wants to go, right? Whereas if we veer from that focus that we've established for ourselves, then liquidity wanes pretty quickly. Therefore, we're quite unique in that all of the other players that are active in the region really depart from these, and therefore this institutional liquidity doesn't get to them. Um, doesn't get to them because we offer full transparency across the process, right? Together with trade tech, we can offer that full transparency where the investor can know exactly which assets are supporting the instruments that they bought. So it's really a question of focus and applying technology and staying super focused to be able to scale that segment, and that's where we are looking to thrive, and we're doing extremely well.
It looks like it as well. Anyone just looking at taking a look at Vabble.io, you can see that really it's going in the line of where the future is going with receivables transactions going forward. All right, for those who are listening and watching, this is the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative Podcast, and we have with us the founder and CEO of Vabble.io. I'm talking about Pablo Terpolilli. Now, we've been talking a bit about technology now, and the efforts within the platform to automate services to your clients. What do you think is specifically the role of technology in your investment activities on the go?
Technology is really essential to us. It's key to everything we do. It's really, as I said earlier, trying to take that process that we know it happens, on paper, and it takes time, and there's several steps that can be automated, can be um, brought up to a platform level where you then can scale them and standardize them. And so that we use technology precisely for that. Having said that, you also said something that I think is quite key. We're closely monitoring all of the developments that are happening around the electronic bill of payments, the electronic promissory notes, the UK government initiatives, and also we're monitoring, we have very close relationships with some of the cybersecurity top cybersecurity firms. So we're very connected. We have ears on them. We're really listening, because everything we do it sort of on a I would say we architect on a smart contract type ready infrastructure. If you think about a receivable from the moment it's actually generated to the moment it is extinguished, it has to go through a certain series of steps, as the process we described earlier, and so that can be implemented into a sort of a smart contract type infrastructure. So I don't want to use many of these terms because people have different, interpretations for these or definitions for these terms. But it's really something that can be automated, and where there's steps that have to go through, and you can check those steps, and you can have, whether the regulator, or, in many cases we link up to the regulator to verify that, an invoice is a, is a true invoice and it's not a fake or a duplicate. Or so we take a number of steps in order to essentially eradicate fraud, which is the very big, I would say, the killer of the asset class. So banks have been extremely good at eradicating fraud. I mean, there's been cases of fraud, but banks, overall have been very good. So we think we can, do that, and even sort of improve the level of scrutiny that the banks can do. Banks are slightly slower to move into new technology. We know what happened, right? Large established institutions versus sort of nimble small startups, and that's where we are.
No, indeed, and I feel that the awareness and the openness to using new technology, even for banks, are realizing that it's not every single piece of technology you can actually create in house, and that this it might be more cost efficient, more user friendly, and actually more advantageous to look outside the box and see how you can work with other technology companies that have solutions that are tailor made to suit your solutions. Now, you've talked quite a bit about your relationship with Trade Tech and with in relation to the CEO, Christoph Gugelman. I'm keen to hear a little bit more about the integration of Vabble with Trade Tech and how you work together and how that relationship has actually gone so far.
Yes, I will sum it up in sort of in very few words. We have an excellent relationship. From something that started as a personal knowledge to actually then having the opportunity to work together, and also to essentially, I think the idea of creating Vabble, happened because of the experience that I had, while working with the team at Tradetech. So then I got a sort of a front seat, really exposure, privileged position to see exactly what was happening, with trade. And I already brought with me that knowledge of the buy side, the institutional side of the business. So I think that being able to combine that background and historical connectivity to the trade finance that I had, because I started in trade finance, with that part of the business of that combination allowed us to start thinking about it. So at one point, I said to Val, to Christoph and Niels, I have to do this. This is very compelling. I feel I have to do this. So they were very supportive from the start, and we have been working closely with TradeTech to basically have the entire trade infrastructure face our distribution side. So our distribution is really the TradeTech infrastructure. They've invested significant amounts of money to develop it to the standard that it is, and that I know it for a fact. And they also have earned the trust of many of these investors that I was talking about. So they are the infrastructure provider as it relates to that distribution.
That's incredible. And you've said something really key here that through Trade Tech, this is the distribution angle for you. And we were very keen at the TFDI to get Vabble on board the TFDI, the TFD initiative late last year. Why do you think it was the right time to join the community of the TFDI? And what do you feel that you can reap from being a part of this community?
Thank you for asking that. The Trade Finance Distribution Initiative is something that is instrumental to bringing together all of the players that are and have a say and have a stake in the business as it is, and in the future of the business. So for us, joining the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative was a key moment, really, when we sort of finished our platform development, and got our bank to do our. So I'm going to give a name here, but JP Morgan is doing our payments and collections on a trust sort of segregated account basis, because we have used all the experience of others, successes and failures to avoid the pitfalls. um, so then we thought this is a time for us to come out of stealth mode, take a more public stance. We've also joined ITFA recently, and I think that's another important step for us as well in maturing as a company. We've managed to attract incredible talent to Vabble, and we are all in all about 25 people now, spread all over the world. We have a little bit in emerging markets. Well, actually, quite a bit in emerging markets. We have a little bit in New York, a bit in continental Europe, and then in London. There's three of us. So it was about the time to put our long trousers and, and mature.
We're certainly very delighted to have you on board the TFD initiative, and wish you all the best of luck with Vabble. Obviously, we're delighted you work with Trade Tech. We're delighted that you're a member of this community, and look forward to seeing all the wonderful and amazing things that will be coming out from your stables this year. I think this is where we will wrap it up on today's podcast. Pablo, it has been such a delight having you on. I just want to say thank you so much, because you're a very busy man. Thank you so much for making the time to be on our podcast series today.
No, Doris, thank you for having me. I've watched the other podcasts, and you've had some really amazing people. We appreciate having the opportunity to explain, to say who we are, and to our investors, I think is important. To our clients, is important. And so, thank you again to you and to Andre and to the whole team at Trade Finance Distribution Initiative.
It's our absolute pleasure. And to all our members out there and all our viewers who are watching and listening, don't forget that you can join the conversation on our YouTube and our Spotify pages, and subscribe to stay in the loop of all our activities. I'm Doris Kononovich. We'll catch you next time. Take care.